Do you need a short petticoat with a bit of inbuilt structure? Then this is the tutorial for you. Join me as I show you how to make a petticoat with an inbuilt hoop. What you'll need: tape measure, lining fabric, scissors, matching thread, pins, white elastic, I'm using 4cm or 1.5 inch elastic, metal boning, wire cutters, 5 meters of 150cm organza or tulle, that's 5.5 yards of 59-inch fabric, for those of you who choose not to use the metric system, sewing machine, and if you're using organza, an overlocker will come in handy. Let's begin. Firstly, take your measuring tape and figure out roughly how long and wide you want your base layer to be. I use this short hoop skirt I've previously made as my guide. I made my measurements 2 meters or 2.2 yards in circumference and 36 centimeters or 14 inches long. Now it's time to cut out the base layer, which is also going to be the hoop skirt. To account for the elastic at the top, I add an additional 10 centimeters or 4 inches, and to allow for the hoop at the bottom, I add an additional 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches. This means I require a rectangle strip of 50 centimeters by 2 meters, or 19.5 inches by 2.2 yards. As my material is not quite wide enough, I cut it from 2 pieces and add seam allowances to the sides. I then sew up the sides with a French seam. After this, I go ahead and do a rolled hem all the way around the top and the bottom of the lining. Next, I fold over the top of the fabric to create a tube for the elastic to go into. I measure out about 5 centimeters or 2 inches and pin down the edge. Over at the sewing machine, I stitch that down. Next, I do a similar process with the bottom, measuring out 2.5 centimeters or a 1 inch fold, which I then sew. Remember to leave a gap at the top and the bottom of about 10 to 15 centimeters or 4 to 6 inches to allow for the insertion of the elastic and boning later. Speaking of which, it's time to cut that boning. Measure out the length that you need. My finished hoop was to be 2 meters or 2.2 yards in circumference, and I knew I wanted about a 10 centimeter or 4 inch overlap. An overlap is very important as it ensures that the hoop will keep its shape. I recommend marking it out and then using your wire cutters or the like to cut it down. Next, grab your elastic and wrap it around your waist so it feels comfortable and secure. Make sure you can get it easily over your hips. Cut off the length you require. Now it's time to do a bit of a test try. This step is not essential, but I highly recommend it as you will want to make sure that you're happy with the length and the width before you start on the petticoat section. Thread your elastic through the top hole and use the safety pin to secure. Then thread the boning through the bottom channel and use some tape to secure the overlap temporarily. Try it all on to make sure you're happy with everything so far. If you're not, make your adjustments before you move on. But if you are happy, congratulations! You've got your hoop skirt base completed. Time to move on to the petticoat. The first thing you'll want to do is measure out how long you want the petticoat to go. Measure from just under the elastic to just past the hoop. So for me, I know I want my finished petticoat to be about 37 or 38 centimeters long, or about 15 inches. This will be important for petticoat maths later. Then it's time to remove the elastic and the boning from the base layers so it will be easier to sew the petticoat on. Trust me, don't try and sew the petticoat on while you've still got the elastic and boning in there. Now it's time to cut the petticoat layers. I want to do 2 sections, an upper and lower section, and 4 layers deep, alternating between red and black. The top sections will be about 2 meters or 2.2 yards in circumference, and the bottom section will be about 2.5 times that, so about 5 meters or 5.5 yards. So in both my red and black organza, I measure and cut out 5 meters. I figured out that to allow for seam allowance, I would need each section to be 21 centimeters or 8.5 inches long. So I cut 2 of the red and 2 of the black at that length across the entire 5 meter length of fabric. Side note, folding the fabric over on itself saves a lot of time. Next was time to create the layers. I used a cutting mat and rotary cutter for this, but honestly, a measuring tape and scissors will do just fine. These 4 strips will be my bottom sections. For the top sections, I wanted to save a bit of time and reduce the bulk at my waist. So instead of cutting 4 more 21cm strips, I doubled it over to 42cm or 16.5 inches and cut out only 2 pieces, one in each colour. This would allow me to iron down the centre and attach the bottom sections to either side of the wider strip. I did something similar in my mini petticoat tutorial, which I will link up the top. Once these were cut, I then cut those lengths down to 210cm or 2.3 yards to allow for seam allowance and a little bit of gather. With the organza now cut into strips, it's time to overlock every single edge. If you use tulle, you can skip this step because that doesn't fray, but I'm a sucker for punishment, so yay for me! Once that is done, sew each strip to itself to form circles. At the ironing table, press open the seams and for the 2 top sections, fold them in on themselves and give them a good press. Now it's time to add the ruffle on! There are lots of ways you can do this and many people like using a ruffling foot or gathering with basting stitches. I'm more calculation based. What I like to do is create 8 markers in my fabric equally distanced from each other. Then I do the same number of pins and the same process with the sections I'm attaching to that initial piece. And finally, I match up the pins and pin both layers together. For more information about this process complete with a diagram, please view my how to make a simple long petticoat tutorial and watch from about the 5.5 minute mark. Once you've pinned one of the long sides of the top section with ruffles, don't forget to attach more ruffles to the other long side. Over at the sewing machine, I sew between the pins, gathering the bottom sections as I go. I call this the lazy lady method. Oh yeah! Works fine every time for me. With all the bottom sections sewn to the top sections, I pin the 2 top sections along their iron fold line and sew them together. Next, I pin the top of the petticoat to the base layer, placing it just under the elastic channel. And then over at the sewing machine, I sew it all down. Insert your elastic and boning into their channels again and give it a try on to make sure you're happy with it. For me, I wanted to add a little more poof to the side, so I added some flounces. Once you're happy with it, it's time to finish it off. I recommend that you remove the boning and sew up the elastic first. Then go ahead and close up that channel opening for the elastic. Next, it's time to secure the white elastic from folding over on itself. To do this, stretch out the waistband and sew a straight stitch down the center of the channel. That will secure the elastic nice and good. Now for the final touch. Insert your boning into the hoop channel one last time, and I recommend that you still tape the overlap together. Then over at your sewing machine, close up that channel too. It really helps if you use a zipper foot to get nice and close to that boning. And there you go! There is your hooped short petticoat. Lots of structure and lots of poof in one garment. These types of petticoats are great for cosplays, just in general, but in particular, if you're doing some sort of quick change skit, it's easy to get on and off. I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial and it comes in handy for you. Please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and don't be afraid to share this with your mates. If you really like what I do, please consider becoming a patron over on my Patreon account, as it really helps me out and allows me to make more tutorials like this one. The link is in the bio. If you would like another petticoat tutorial, I've got a playlist of all my petticoat tutorials coming up right now. Thanks for watching.